Ladies and gentlemen, our program will begin in 5 minutes. Ladies and gentlemen, our program is about to begin. Please welcome Bennett Richardson, General Manager and Global Head of Public Affairs at
Good afternoon,
Semaphore.
everybody. How are you? Thank you all so much for joining us the final session of the World Economy Summit. Really appreciate you being here. One of the most important conversations we're doing this week, what's next for the global workforce? As the voice of God said, I'm Bennett Richardson. I'm Semaphor's General Manager and Global Head of Public Affairs. Really appreciate you all being here. Semaphore is the world's fastest growing global independent news platform, which we're very proud of. You're sitting here among our biggest convening of the year, but Semaphore is only 2.5 years old, so we've pulled off quite a feat in that short time. In addition to our live journalism, we have more than 5 million readers a month on semaphore.com, about 1 million subscribers to our newsletters, which I hope includes many, if not all of you, and editions here in the US, in sub-Saharan Africa, in the Gulf, and many more global regions to come soon. And as I hope you've seen throughout some of the sessions today, our mission is really to build transparent, intelligent, impartial, global journalism. And that includes the live journalism that we've been doing this week to help leaders like yourselves make decisions and navigate this ever-changing world. No world changing faster than that of the workforce, the workplace, the relationship between employers and employees. And so really excited to hear from a lot of those shaping the future of work, from talent retainment and recruitment to rapidly changing workplace culture, big technological shifts. Obviously, we had some great conversations about AI in the workplace this morning. I'm sure some of those will continue this afternoon. First, we'll dive into some brand new data from Gallup's annual State of the Global Workplace Survey. It was a fascinating trove of information providing new insights in the global workforce and the biggest challenges today's employers and employees are facing. So I'd like to invite up Gallup and really appreciate Gallup's partnership. I'd like to invite up John Clifton, Gallup CEO, to join me for a quick conversation about the state of the global workplace. John. John, thanks again for doing this and for your partnership. We love working with Gallup, and this is always such a fascinating body of work. One of the biggest headlines from your State of the Global Workplace report was that there was a drop in employee engagement for only the second time since 2009. I think you said the first time in like 4 or 5 years, first being after COVID. It's a two-part question. One, what is engagement? What makes up? I'm assuming we're not talking about people, proposing at the office, right? What are we talking about when we mean employee engagement? And what are some of the reasons behind the decline that you all have been seeing?
It's remarkable how much of our life we spend working. We've made 2 estimates on this. One was actually another organization. They found that we spend 110,000 hours of a lifetime working. We replicated the analysis using our global data, and the lower bound is 83,000. Either way you look at it, we spend anywhere between 9 to 13 straight years of our life at work. So it's a fair question to say, well, how do we quantify how life at work is going? And that's what we're trying to accomplish here with this concept of employee engagement. I think what's got us so concerned is that despite the fact that there are so many, colleges, universities, MBA programs, great manager programs that have been doing these kind of trainings, there has been a doubling of engagement throughout the entire world. But most recently, as you mentioned, there's been a 2-point decline. And when you project that to how many millions of people, 30 million people are doing a lot worse today than they were last year. And that's a concern that I think all of us should share.
What, if you had, I know not all of this is necessarily in the data, is there a biggest driver of that decline? When you double clicked on that, is there one thing that really stood out to you?
I think the single biggest decline is the idea that right now, if you want to know how a team is doing, look to how the manager is doing. If the manager emotionally checks out, the statistical chance that the team will as well is very high. And the group where we saw the largest decline is with managers. And I kind of don't blame them. Because right now we did a study here in the United States and we asked people, are you experiencing rapid change within your organization? It kind of feels like people were responding to us saying, what? Yeah. 70% said that they're experiencing a great deal of disruptive change. And that sort of human glue that's expected to drive that change are managers. And so they feel like everything is chaos. BCG just came out with a study. What executives want? Cost cutting. IoT analytics, they just did text analytics of all C-level or all CEO earnings calls. Number one thing, more AI. I mean, it's just thing after thing after thing, new legislation from Washington. And it's managers that feel that effect and have to go get their teams energized to say, let's get up again this morning and go do this change. And it just wears on them. And so we're seeing that in the data. And ultimately, managers usually have higher engagement than their employees. They do globally, but they don't here in America. And if you want to see where there is a real recession happening now, there is an emotional recession that's happening in America's workplace, and it's been happening for the past couple of years. America went from 30 to 36% engaged in the workplace over a 10-year period of time. And since 2020, all those gains have been eviscerated.
Wow.
And that's a real concern because these have serious productivity consequences.
Totally. And to maybe take a different angle into this, productivity consequences are huge. Obviously, there are probably some questions around turnover and retention when it comes to employee engagement, but it seems like a pretty employer-friendly job market right now. And so, if you're being a more cynical CEO or employer, is this a priority for them? Are you worried about that employee engagement? If you feel like, well, with AI, with so many people applying to our company, how do you juggle all of this? And where does employee engagement sort of rank for those?
Maybe
leaders?
I'll frame your question in a more pointed way, because I think there are some really cynical executives that when they hear the terms employee engagement, what they hear back is an employee happiness survey. Yep. Or an employee satisfaction survey. And they go, well, I don't want more of that. Get it out of here. I want more AI. What they don't realize is this has serious consequences on productivity. That 2-point drop that we saw globally, we believe, amounts at a $500 billion loss in productivity. And if organizations fully optimized based on what we would consider this emotional economy, we think that there could be gains in the economy of almost $10 trillion. And so I think that is the language that most executives speak, which is money. And so that's how you explain it in money terms.
It's such an important point that, like you said, can often be missed, which is what you're saying is an engaged workforce, a satisfied workforce is a more productive workforce. There's not a lot of people who hate their job who are like, I'm going to work so hard today because I just hate this place. So that makes a lot of sense. I want to dive in on the manager layer, which feels like such an important point that you started to highlight, because no matter how much you love your CEO, no matter how much you're inspired by your mission, maybe you dig going back into the office because they've got a new selection of top shelf candy or something. But day to day, it's the people next to you. It's the manager that, like you said, is either a little checked out or you feel really supported by. Tell us more about the role that managers play in organizations and sort of that backbone of that day-to-day engagement.
It's incredible to me that despite everything that Peter Drucker had written about the importance of management, it's like it just immediately gets lost by so many executives. And right now there's even a concept that's going around which is called unbossing. And even McKinsey, they have a new book out a couple of years ago where they talked about power to the middle. And they said maybe they even had a role in accidentally going too far in terms of cutting middle management, because they said it's so critical. And the amount of studies on this is amazing. So LSE did a study, this is very recent. They looked at 35,000 manufacturing plants here in the United States. And they said that there's one factor that explains productivity more than things like IT development, R&D, and the skills of their employees, which is the practice of management. In fact, even the head of UPenn's Generative AI Center, Ethan Mollick, he came out with a new book recently called Co-Intelligence. I highly recommend it. It's fantastic. He has this moment where it's almost like he digresses and he goes, oh yeah, I used to do this research on a topic that a lot of people think is boring, which is on management. And I couldn't believe what I was reading. And he said, I looked at the sales of video games, and the one thing that accounted for 20% of the variance in video game sales was managers. And it was even more important than who the executives were and who designed the video game. Think about that. yet it gets totally unnoticed. So, with so many of these executives that are dying for increased productivity gains, you hear some executives musing about the idea that they want their own Doge departments, when the real productivity already exists in the human intelligence that they already have, but they're not fully optimizing it, and yet they can. And it's through management.
Yeah, the Doge buzzsaw approach doesn't seem like a perfect way to improve manager engagement. Thinking about though, like you have so much data on this stuff. We've got a lot of managers in the room here, including one who's interviewing you. Like, what can managers do? And I guess the real question is, what can organizations and managers of managers do to improve that manager engagement? Like, how do you get that middle management layer more excited, more, I guess, trustworthy? Like, there's so many elements of engagement. Like, where do you go? Like, what's the first step?
Well, this is amazing to me. So we were inspired because we saw this study in the UK. Somebody went out and interviewed managers and said, have you ever been trained on the very basic principles of management? And a huge majority go, no, not at all. And we're like, wow, that's amazing. What if we pose that question to the entire world? So as part of our Gallup World Poll, we went to 140 countries, 2/3 of the world, we do face-to-face interviews. We literally show up in people's homes. The other 1/3, we call them at their homes. And everyone who identified as a manager, we posed that question to them. Have you ever been trained to do this? 56% of managers said, I've never been trained on what it means to be a manager. Think about that. And so if there's any place to start, go right there. There's a firm, not Gallup, it was published in The Atlantic, and this was in Italy, and they looked at a number of firms, and they went and did training, and they saw the managers that were trained on basic management principles saw an increase in productivity by 49% compared to those who didn't. It's sort of like, how much math do you need to realize the very importance of the practice of management? So I think we would just go so far as to say, step one, train them.
Note to self, take a manager training. Got it. Perfect. One place that is causing a lot of uncertainty, but also a lot of gains, obviously, is AI. We had a big track this morning on AI. One of the themes we were talking about there was both scale adoption, agentic workforces, kind of building out these different workforce approaches to integration with AI and all sorts of different levels of expertise. Like, how, I have to imagine this is such a tangled web because you have excitement mixed with paranoia, mixed with confusion. Like, how does this moment shape up in terms of employee engagement? Like, how is technology right now at this pivotal moment affecting how employees are feeling?
Well, I think what's most remarkable is that everybody wants to see more of an embrace of AI because, some of the aspects of work, if it can be automated, it'll be amazing for everyone. But the reality is that while executives think that they have these huge AI rollout plans, employees still aren't using it. So we did a study with CHROs and said, how many of you are actually rolling out AI plans? I think it was 97% said that they've rolled out an extensive AI program. Then we went to employees and said, how many of you use this? Do you know what percent told us never? 67%. And by the way, the many of you in the room that are probably like, oh my gosh, I use it every day. I mean, I'm on it all the time. 4% agree with you. 4%. Now, what's the barrier to getting more AI into organizations? Effective managers. Because when we go in and see that when there are well-run teams by managers, they are far more likely to pick up AI in a more rapid and a more responsible way. Think about that. And I'll leave you with this thought too, because isn't it amazing if you think about what it is that you're doing with AI on a daily basis is you're effectively your own CEO with agents that report to you. So if you think about it, who were the original prompt engineers? Managers. Managers were arguably humanity's original prompt engineers. Why? Because they were the ones, not to artificial intelligence, but to human intelligence, had to give clear expectations. And now the same thing is required of all of us. If we are to effectively use AI, we must engage in the very basic management principles of just, can we give clear expectations to AI? And by the way, as humanity, we're not great at it. So we ask human beings today, this is the very foundation of what we call engagement, and we say, do you know what's expected of you at work? If we were so awesome at prompt engineering with human intelligence, guess what percent of people say that they can fully agree to what's expected of them at work? Half of all workers globally don't fully know. Think about that. But if we're going to get the real gains from AI, we need to do a lot better, not just at being able to prompt and give clear expectations. We need to be able to give clear expectations to each other to fully optimize not just AI, but the human intelligence that's already existed.
Amazing. So John's got 2 action items for your next one-on-one back at the office. Take a manager training, take a prompt engineering AI training. That's perfect. Thank you so much, John, for kicking us off.
Thank you very much.
Appreciate it.
Thank you.
Thanks, everybody.
Please welcome Representative Darren LaHood of Illinois, Chairman of the Ways and Means Subcommittee on Work and Welfare, and Eleanor Mueller, Congress reporter at Semaphore.
All right. Good afternoon, all of you. Thank you for sticking around for the last day of our summit, and thank you so much, Congressman LaHood, for taking the time to be with us on what I understand is your son's birthday. Not an easy thing to miss out on.
Well, great to be with you, Eleanor, and thanks for having me at the World Economic Summit that Semaphore is putting on.
Of course. Congressman LaHood is a member of the House Ways and Means Committee, but not only that, he's the chair of its Work and Welfare Subcommittee, so he's an excellent speaker for this track. I would be remiss, Congressman, if I did not, ask you off the bat whether or not you have any designs on Senator Durbin's Senate seat after he announced his retirement earlier this week.
Well, we'll see. You don't often have an open Senate seat in the state of Illinois. They come about every 25 years. And so we've had a lot of people reach out to us. And so we're going to take a hard look at it, and we'll make a decision at the appropriate time.
There you have it. Have you had any preliminary conversations or not yet?
Well, I got to talk to my family first. You got to have your family on board for taking on something like this, and we'll look at that. But we've been very encouraged by a lot of support and encouragement from folks throughout the state of Illinois. But I'm also very happy with the district that I currently have and serving on the Ways and Means Committee and the House Intelligence Committee. We have a lot of work ahead of us this year.
So speaking of serving on the Ways and Means Committee, we're back to the Hill next week for committees to start marking up their portions of Trump's tax agenda. Are you confident at this point that Congress will be able to clear something to President Trump by Memorial Day weekend as was initially planned?
Well, we're working at it, Eleanor. The Ways and Means Committee under the leadership of Chairman Smith has been working diligently really over the last year. We set up 10 tax teams last year in anticipation of winning the House and the Senate and having President Trump there. And over the last couple months, we've been really locked in on writing this bill. I would say we're head and shoulders ahead of the Senate in terms of pen to paper and clicking through the bill. As you're well aware, we want to make a number of the provisions that were not made permanent in 2017 permanent. Things like 199A, 100% bonus depreciation, R&D, the research and development tax credit, refining the child tax credit. So these are kind of foundational to what we need to do. If you think about what we did in 2017, I would argue it created the best economy in my lifetime in terms of record economic growth, high wages, lots of jobs, and we want to make sure we continue that going. So we're on track to do that. When we get back next week, we'll be in session for 4 weeks. And the Speaker and Chairman Smith have us on a track to try to get a bill out of the Ways and Means Committee, I would say by early June. And that's what we're focused on right now.
So speaking of those conversations, one of the biggest debates that remains unsettled is how to approach Inflation Reduction Act tax credits. The White House has told lawmakers they should be looking at them. Some Republicans on the Hill have said we should be really careful about how we do this. I mean, do you see Congress preserving at least some of those credits?
We'll see. As you're well aware, when the IRA, the Inflation Reduction Act, was passed under the Biden administration, it was a very partisan bill. No Republicans in the House or Senate supported it. Doesn't mean there weren't some provisions in there that we as Republicans were supportive of, but I think it was just the partisan nature of how the bill was rammed through by reconciliation. So as we look at this particular tax bill and how the IRA tax credits are affected, it's not going to surprise you or your viewers, Eleanor, that there's a bullseye on the IRA. But I think if you look overall at the tax bill, we've predicated what we want to do on predictability and certainty for companies and businesses, for long and short-term investments. We don't want to pull the rug out from under businesses. A number of the IRA provisions have benefited red states and red districts, and companies and businesses have done well, depending on the tax credit. However, we as Republicans believe in the free market system. We're not in the business of subsidizing like China does or having state-owned enterprises. So I think, again, as one member on the committee, I've tried to take the approach of looking at what's a reasonable ramp down, what makes sense in terms of finding that sweet spot. And you know, if you look at the tax credits, we have tax credits in there that affect wind, solar, hydrogen, nuclear, the electric vehicle tax credit. And I think the approach we're looking at now is how you have an appropriate ramp down that allows for businesses and companies to continue to be active in this space, but also saves money, you know, in terms of what we want to do in the tax bill.
So another big priority of yours, the Affordable Housing Credit Improvement Act. Obviously, the U.S. is facing a real crisis of housing affordability. I mean, do you see that legislation making it into the GOP's tax bill?
I'm optimistic. I've been the chief sponsor of what's called LIHTC, the Low-Income Housing Tax Credit. I really think about this as workforce housing, and different from 2017 when we passed the first tax bill. We have a housing crisis now. I think about my own district and throughout Illinois, whether it's rural, suburban, or urban, we don't have enough housing, and it's too expensive to build new housing because of inflation, supply chain, labor. And so the low-income housing tax credit has been around since Ronald Reagan. It's been used at appropriate times in our economic history where we need to help the housing industry. Now is the time to do that. Eleanor, last year, we actually passed this bill out of the Ways and Means Committee, brought it to the House floor, got over 300 votes, bipartisan, and then it got stuck in the Senate. So we're going to continue to push to have this in the tax bill and in the reconciliation bill. We think now is the time, and we have a lot of bipartisan support and support with Republicans on the Ways and Means Committee. I think we introduced the bill 3 weeks ago again, and I think we have 2/3 of the Republicans on the Ways and Means Committee on the bill, and so we're going to continue to move forward. It's vital that we increase our housing stock in the United States.
So another thing that the House wants to see stay in the tax bill is a debt ceiling increase. The Treasury Department is maybe going to tell Congress next week when it expects to exceed its borrowing authority. I mean, what do you expect to hear from them, first of all, and how will that change the conversation on the Hill, you think?
Well, President Trump has said he wants this as part of the reconciliation and part of the tax bill is to have the debt ceiling included in there. Now, that's going to be somewhat controversial because we have a lot of our members, particularly in the House, that have never voted for a debt ceiling increase. And so it's going to be a little different this time around. But make no mistake about it, we can't default on our debt. There's real economic ramifications of doing that. I think, you know, having President Trump pushing for this and having our leadership push for that is going to be a bit of an uphill battle on this. But as you've seen earlier this year with getting the budget reconciliation bill passed on the House floor by a very slim majority was a positive thing, and passing the CR with a slim majority. So we've had a pretty good track record thus far in getting important legislation through. I think this one will be a little tougher, but it's something the president wants, and I think that will be impactful.
All right, well, thank you so much, Congressman. Again, tell your son happy birthday from all of us here at the World Economy Summit, and we appreciate you taking the time.
Thanks, Eleanor. Have a great day.
You too.
Please welcome D.G. McPherson, Chairman and CEO of W.W. Granger, Tony Sarsam, CEO of Spartan Nash, and Max Tanney, Media Editor at Semaphore.
Thank you guys for doing that. A little bit of musical chairs to get us started. Really appreciate it. DG, thank you so much for being here. Tony, thanks for being here. Obviously, DG, CEO of W.W. Granger, the industrial supply chain company, and Tony Sarsam, the CEO of Spartan Nash, which is the grocery retailer and distributor. So this panel is really about corporate culture and building a sustainable culture that attracts employees. But we obviously, you guys run big businesses, that have their tentacles all across the country and the world, and so we want to ask you, about the economic environment today, and obviously the news of the day, the thing that's defined most of this week, which is the discussions around tariffs. And so, DG, why don't we start with you? I'm really curious. How is the current economic environment and the ongoing discussion about tariffs impacting your business?
Well, so we have a very big and complex supply chain. We have millions and millions of products that we serve customers with, and some of those are sourced overseas, some of those are domestic. What I would say is two things. One is, for us, our job is to make sure we protect service for customers, so we spend most of our time worried about that in these times, and also to make sure we've got an engaged team. So our focus has been there. The other is we've invested very heavily in product information the last few years, and so we know source of supply, we know cost structure, so we're working with our suppliers to understand, depending on where things land, what we have to do and what the right thing to do is. It's very complicated and it changes every single day. But we're just following our principles of making sure that we protect service for our customers and can serve our customers. That's the most important thing for us.
And Tony, I watched an interview with you in which earlier this year, in which you said basically, and I'm paraphrasing here, you said basically, like, besides setting aside the price of eggs, that food prices had largely stabilized. Do you expect to see the price of food go? Do you expect to see it go up? Do you expect specific foods to go up specifically? And I'm really curious what you're seeing so far.
Yeah, so it is probably certainly a hot topic so far this week, in particular with tariffs, and everyone's wondering. I got a lot of questions about bananas, which I'm stocking up and filling the
coffee
pantry.
As well.
A little bit of coffee, avocados, all those hot topics. So we're seeing that now. We're actually in discussions right now with the folks who do have the source from internationally. And as a food solutions company, our objectives are we want to make sure we keep the costs as low as we can, which means we need to explore other supply chain options in some cases. We are in some cases doing many choices. There's no bananas that grow in the Dakotas or Minnesota or any of those places. So we are going to wind up with higher costs, and we will make sure that we're as transparent about that as possible. But I guess the one thing, though, with all the discussion about the economics, it is I think that we have this existential threat right now about people, and I think that to me is for the things like the tariffs will come and go, and there's other issues that we'll deal with. But I'm delighted to be able to participate in this topic today, because I think the people equation is so important. It is a great opportunity, and the risk is that we won't have the people we need to run this great economy here. And the U.S. economy is so amazing, it is so resilient, and the ingredient that we need right now is we need people. We have a declining birth rate, we have an immigration policy that's not very well founded, and we need to get more people's hands involved in this marvel of the U.S. economy. And what we're going to talk about today is how we establish competitive advantage by having great people organizations, but that should not be a zero-sum game. We should find a way to have policies where all of us can get more people involved in this marvel of our country. Absolutely.
And DG, one of the things that you guys have done to get people involved with Granger, you have 26,000 employees. You were telling me backstage. You guys in 2019 rolled out something called the Granger Edge. Can you explain what that is?
Sure. It's like many companies, we wanted it to have a placeholder for what we think is important in terms of how we work with each other, how we work with our suppliers and our customers. And it's a set of principles that we basically go by and live by every day. And in terms of culture, the most important one for us is starting with the customer. And I think in terms of driving engagement, I heard the discussion earlier around with the gentleman from Gallup. The highest scoring engagement marker we have, which is way high, is around customer focus. Our team members believe they understand the customer, what the customer does, and that energizes them every day to come to work. And so there's competing with urgency, there's working well together, there's some basic principles. And they're words on a page. I think the thing that we've done is we've lived them every day, and our actions suggest that we really care about them. And you do that for 5 or 6 years, and people start to believe it. I think that's really helped our culture.
And Tony, Spartan Nash has 20,000 staff. You were actually saying in our prep call something interesting, which is that you guys, in some cases, pay a lower wage, but your employees stay longer than at some of your competitors. How is that possible?
Well, it's part of this whole equation about making people feel like they belong and are engaged. And I think if you think about the fundamentals at work, we've talked a lot this week. We've heard a lot of people talking about the no regrets bet. And I think there's no better no regrets bet than people, as DG just articulated. And so we lean on the core elements of what matters to people the very most. And what matters to them is they want to have a sense of purpose when they come to work. They want to feel like their work is meaningful within that organization with that purpose. They want to feel like a winner. They want to be recognized for that. They want to make sure they understand what's going on in the organization, so they have that sense of community and they're communicated with well. And ultimately, they rely on the company to create an environment where they can do their best work. And when people feel that, I believe that they feel that sense of belonging, at the margin, people are not going to leave for an extra quarter or 50 cents an hour.
Well, so kind of draw that out a little bit. What does that look like in practice? You said communicate more with your employees. Does that mean, what form does that take? Does that mean sending them more emails? Does that mean their manager talks to them a little bit more? What does that actually mean in practice?
Well, it means quite a bit. So we have a very robust plan overall. So amongst those elements, we have things like, we have, of course, the emails and all those basic tools, but we do, every single period, I send out a video to the field organization for them to review as part of the beginning of their meeting. It tells them what's going on in the company, and then we have tools for the supervisors and talk about what's next with their folks. So we actually require that they have these regular pulsed meetings. They meet with them in some cases in our distribution centers. They meet every single day, and we have the stuff that we add from the top. We do town halls in the field where we actually entertain questions, or we go to our stores and to our distribution centers. We do a simulcast town hall every quarter for the entire company that we have at our headquarters, and we broadcast that out. We use written tools because people still like to read things that they can hold on to once in a while, which is really cool. And so we have written publications we send out, and a great many others. So we use a term, it's not the most elegant term, but this idea about carpet bombing the organization with communication. We make sure they have all the tools they need, everything they need to know about the company. And we want to treat them like they're SEC insiders. I want them to feel that they actually know what's going on. And so we work very hard at making sure they have all these various communication tools.
And DG, I'm really curious, what do you think is the most common mistake that you see your competitors make that you guys don't when it comes to workplace culture?
Yeah, we have so many competitors, I'm not sure I'm going to be able to answer that directly. I think the most important thing that we do for culture, I think, though, and it goes to communication, is we have been very clear that the value creation for our company happens at the customer side. So getting out in the field, there's an expectation for executives to not be in the office all the time. You've got to go visit customers, you've got to go visit team members. Virtually every week I'm out talking with team members and getting to know their perspectives and creating a culture where they can tell you the truth and tell you what's not working, I think, and then also reacting so nothing bad happens when you hear the truth is really, really important. And so I think we work very hard to create a culture where we're getting feedback from our team members, from customers, the good, the bad, the ugly, all the time. And if you can create that environment, it lowers the barriers for people to feel like they can belong. It makes it much easier for people to belong. Can
you give us an example of that? I'm really curious. Like, when was a time when you were, out in the field visiting, people on staff, and they told you, DG, this is not working?
Last week, I was in Carolina. I heard some things about what was going on in one of our facilities that we were working on improving. I actually visited a customer, and it turns out that we had a COVID era restriction on delivery that we removed after the visit because we had forgotten it was still there.
Wow.
And so the customer said, why, when we have an emergency, why is it taking 3 hours to get something? And I kind of scratched my head because it should take 30 minutes. It's pretty easy to do that. And it turns out that we weren't getting product to customers until afternoon because during COVID, we didn't want people coming in the morning. So just an example of getting feedback on what's working.
Yeah. I'm really curious. This is a question for both of you guys, but I'll ask you first, Tony. Do you see generational differences in both hiring and retention? I'm really curious what it's like, trying to recruit, someone who is 25. I mean, I imagine across 20,000 employees, you've got, people pretty young and obviously, people who are getting up there a little bit. I'm really curious what it's like, and the successes and what's worked in terms of recruiting, Gen Z versus, Gen X or millennials.
Yeah, and there is absolutely generational differences. And we study those things, so it's important in the way we engage with people. The headline is that those basic fundamentals I mentioned a moment ago are the same for everybody. Everybody wants to feel like they belong. Everybody wants to feel like a winner. They want to get feedback. They want to feel like they're communicated to. Those are those basic fundamentals. And on top of that, you say, well, what are the differences in the current generation versus the folks who led a few years earlier? And among those, the current generation is much more sensitive about what the company stands for. They want to feel really, really attached to the purpose, more so than the previous generations did. They're increasingly, interestingly, they're really intensely curious on knowing and seeing a visible leadership team, a visible CEO. Much more so than they would have been a generation ago, and that matters more to them because I think they're trying to cobble together a sense of this is what I do. I like this. This purpose makes sense to me, and they want to feel like that belonging in a way that's a little bit different than the previous generations. There's also an element of there are, as I mentioned, about the kind of tight supply of talent. Without actually articulating that, people know, and they know they have choices. And so they're also going to be more swift to say, I don't want to be part of this, I'm going to move on. And they'll endure fewer hardships if the company doesn't articulate the things that they feel that they value. And so we have to be on our game more because people will leave more quickly because they know there's choices in the marketplace.
DG, what do you think? Generational difference within the work, within your company?
I think most of the things that Tony said, I would agree with. I do think that every generation thinks the one behind them is very different. I'm not sure it's ever been true. I think at the core, people are people, and I think to the extent that you can create an environment where people understand what you do and why you do it, and they rally against the mission, that always works and always has worked. I would say we've seen that particularly in hiring with technology. We are a very big technology player. We're one of the top 20 e-tailers in the country, which doesn't make sense because we're not even a retail company, but that's true. So we have big technology teams. A lot of the hires have been young people, and creating an environment there that connects them to the organization and to our purpose has been really important.
Well, guys, we're right out of time just now. The light is blinking, so thank you guys so much for talking, sitting down with us today. Thank you.
Thank you.
Please welcome Horatio Rosansky, Chairman, CEO, and President, Booz Allen Hamilton, and Morgan Chalfant, Deputy Washington Editor, Semaphore.
Horacio, thank you so much for being here. Obviously, Booz Allen has a huge hand in a lot of major tech developments, AI, but I wanted to first get your reaction to what's going on with Doge, because obviously it's something you've had experience with. Do you think that Doge understands what federal contractors do, and what's it been like working with them and trying to kind of educate them on what you do?
So first of all, thank you for having me. It's great to be here. The Doge has been learning very, very fast. There's a lot written about, I think we forget, right? This is, a 4-year term is, 460 days? We're 100 days in, so if this was baseball, we're maybe at the bottom of the first. And so I think it is way too early to declare that how things are working, and it's working and it's not working, bottom of the first. Mm-hmm. I think in a way DOGE has already made some significant changes that are probably here to stay. So we've been arguing that there are a number of practices that are inefficient, that our government could do better and that needs to do better. I've been arguing, as when I talk about China, about speed. Been arguing that there's too much duplication across the government. The efficiency conversation was always third order, fourth order effect, and now it's at the top of the conversation. And I actually think that's a good thing. Mm-hmm. The second thing is people are now much more interested in how the government actually works as a result of DOGE and how things actually happen and how things get bought and why they get bought and all of that. And I actually think that's super positive. I mean, the functioning democracy, we all need to understand what our tax dollars are being spent on. And so I think all of that is really positive. Mm-hmm. The challenge is 4 years is a long time and it isn't to change something as significant as the federal government. And so I continue to think at some point you got to pick your spots and decide where you're going to have the biggest impact and go after that first. And I think that's what I hope to see is sort of a focusing on those efforts, on the things that would be of most benefit to the American people and to the taxpayer.
Mm-hmm. And what would those look like, do you think?
So on the efficiency side, certainly there's a lot of discussion about improper payments and fraud. By the way, all fraud is improper payment, but not all improper payments are fraud. But that's clearly an area of focus. And I go back to duplication, right? I mean, because Congress funds everything by agency and sometimes inside the agency by a little piece, there's no incentive to get something great in one place and proliferate it across the government. Mm-hmm. So for example, right on the health, public health space, there are 7 different registries that at least we know of, there may be more, that different agencies use to decide, is this a valid doctor to whom I can send a payment if they send their, and why do we have 7 different lists mm-hmm. that are not, by the way, coordinated with each other, and why isn't there a national registry and all of these agencies use? And that's a small example, but when you add it all up, we're tracking something in the order of $20-30 billion a year that could be reduced if you just reduce these duplicative systems. So to me, those are great areas of focus. And then the one that is near and dear to my heart is DOGE is right that the federal government is slow in adopting technology. Mm-hmm. There are still 1,700 plus brick and mortar on-prem data centers spread across the federal government. None of our companies have, if you have one data center left, you're trying hard to get rid of it. Mm-hmm. So why don't we move all of that to the cloud yesterday? Mm-hmm. Because it's not just cheaper, but you can't implement AI on a 1950s computer system either. So we're falling further and further behind if we don't make those changes.
Mm-hmm. And I wanted to ask you about a big announcement that Booz had today, which is this partnership with Meta on Space Llama's AI program. Can you talk about what you're trying to accomplish with that and what it is?
Sure. So Booz Allen is the premier leader of AI in the federal government. And we work on AI across the spectrum from civilian agencies to national security missions, which are about 75% of what we do is national security related. And one of the big issues is how do you make AI useful at the edge, mm-hmm. right? I mean, most commercial technologies are developed on the assumption that you're sitting on this great facility with air conditioning, with perfect amounts of energy, the newest GPUs and the rest. The reality is if you're a soldier out there, you may have no communications. If you're in space, you have no communications. And so what we've been doing is testing different ways of using large language models and AI in general in these edge cases. Space being a really important one because mm-hmm. autonomy in space is going to be absolutely crucial. Mm-hmm. So we did a piece of research about 18 months ago where we put the first LLM in the International Space Station on the National Lab site, which was it's essentially an application that can that we've trained on all of the operating manuals of the space station. So an astronaut can say, okay, how do I fix this? Mm-hmm. as opposed to having to go read through the manuals and everything else. Think of it as like, in my house, I go to YouTube. And the space station, at least they can go to this. But the challenge with it is that was a text only. MOL, Llama is multi-MOL. Llama is open weights, open source. And so we could tune it to do that much better working with Meta, and that just got deployed. It's pretty cool.
Yeah, it's
and it's just the
fascinating.
beginning. I mean, we're going to need these large language models in space.
One thing I know that you're really focused on is China and the U.S.-China competition on AI. What do you think the risk of Chinese generative AI overtaking the U.S. in its global influence is?
It's a great question. People often ask, well, are we ahead? Are we behind? And it's hard to answer that question specifically because what does that mean, being ahead or being behind, right? I mean, what are the metrics? What you can observe now is two fundamentally different paths, right? In the US, we're building these super powerful large language models, which, again, require exquisite compute infrastructure and are the best and most powerful in the world. That is without question. And eventually, if they get powerful enough, they become their own flywheel, because once large language models are training large language models, the speed at which innovation is going to happen is going to be breathtaking. China, for a variety of reasons, is taking a much different view, which is the models don't need to be as good, but they can run on older infrastructure, less power, less communication infrastructure. If you think about DeepSeek, it certainly can do that. If you think about Baidu's new model, Alibaba's Quinn, they're all of a class. The challenge with that, from my perspective, from a national security perspective, is you end up in a Huawei type situation, where the parts of the world that cannot afford this super expensive infrastructure is going to end up using the Chinese models, not the American models, because they may be inferior, but they can afford them. And then you wake up one day, like we have on the telecom system, and every switch is Chinese made, and you worry, is there a back door? Well, there's actually a front door, because all of the switches are calling home for diagnostics and upgrade all the time. Imagine now if essentially public opinion driven by large language models across the world was driven by Chinese models. And so, which ties again to in a weird way, to the Space Llama conversation. We as a country need to continue on this path, while at the same time beginning to invest on smaller models that can be used by other countries, that can be used with lower infrastructure and lower cost, may not be as powerful, but would be just as important.
We have time for one last question. I'm just returning to the Trump administration's policies. I'm wondering if you think the cuts that the administration is making in terms of the government and its economic policies risk undermining the U.S. technical workforce.
I think a lot of it depends, right? I mean, like I said, we're sort of at the bottom of the first. And so some of these things are still a bit in the eye of the beholder and not fully understood, not fully realized. So there is an argument that makes sense to me, which is, if we can find these efficiencies, then we give ourselves as a country the opportunity to decide how do we want to invest them. Do you want to invest them in deficit reduction and debt reduction? Do you want to invest them in, training a new generation of technical workforce? Do you want to invest them in better technology at the federal level, in national security, and so forth? So I think that's still an unanswered question for the administration and for Congress. How are they going to use all of these savings that hopefully are going to get generated through this process? And I think, time will tell.
Horacio, thank you so much for the time. Really appreciate it.
Thank you.
Please welcome Diane Hoskins, Global Co-Chair of Gensler, Judy Marks, Chair, CEO, and President of Otis Worldwide Corporation, and Andrew Edgecliffe Johnson, CEO Editor at Semaphore.
Thank you. Good to see everybody, and thanks for joining us live and online. And welcome to our guests today, Diane Hoskins, Global Co-Chair of Gensler, the world's largest architecture firm, whose projects I believe include the Washington's Capital One Arena and others. You'll have to fill us in on the rest of the landscape that you're responsible for in the city. And Judy Marks, Chair and CEO of Otis Worldwide, a recent interviewee in my CEO Signal newsletter. Thank you for that, Judy. Whose elevators and escalators we all know, they move 2.4 billion people a day, you tell me. So we are here to talk about the global workforce, where it's at right now and where it's going. We've given this session, the title of Out of Office, which may confuse people. It's a reference to a little feature in the CEO Signal newsletter, which we have every week. So we will probably get back to the office at some point, but we want to focus on the workforce more than the workplace. But just to establish our starting points here, can I assume that after all of our debates about remote working over the past 5 years, you're both team office, right?
Absolutely.
Yeah, okay. So you know the vested interests will carry on without fear or favour. Can you just start us off, both of you, by just giving us a profile of your own workforces? Judy, what is the Otis workforce?
Yeah, delighted to be here, Andrew. I have the privilege of leading probably one of the most distributed workforces you can imagine across the globe. We go to market in 200 countries and territories, and not just in terms of manufacturing and installation, but we have, of our 72,000 colleagues, 44,000 are field professionals. They're mechanics who keep the world moving every day. And if you think about us, we're in every city and every town and anything 3 stories and above across the globe. So we have an incredibly distributed workforce where more than half don't go to an office or branch office. We have 1,400 branch offices because they're out serving customers every day, and they're doing it in a very independent, autonomous manner. But we do have, as you can imagine, 17 manufacturing facilities. We are an industrial company, so we've got a manufacturing workforce that's right in the midst of automation changes and digital thread. And then we have every other skill you can imagine, again, distributed across 1,400 locations, sales, service, all of our finance, as well as our R&D. We have 6 design centers spread across the globe. So no matter where you are, we are the company now for 171 years that has helped to provide the technology that allows cities to rise and to keep everybody safe and moving.
Right. And Diane, what's the profile of your workforce right now?
Sure. Thank you, Andrew. It's great to be here. It's great to be here with Judy. You know, it's hard to think of a building without an elevator, right? So there's.
Well, we need you for the building.
Well, there we are. Symbiotic relationship here. We are part of the same ecosystem, but different parts. So as Judy described, you know, they're part of the actual implementation, and we're at that very front end in the design. And so our workforce, and we're the largest architecture firm in the world, we are in 56 different locations, different cities across the world. You can imagine, you know, architects are needed everywhere. I like to say it's the second oldest profession, but you know, we've always needed places.
Journalism being the first.
and more reputable as well. Yeah.
But we have, you know, we're the beginning of that kind of creative process, and so we have, you know, over 6,000 creative folks that are working with clients. Literally, we worked with clients in over half the countries of the world, so over 100 countries, where our teams were working with clients to create, whether it's that new building or a stadium or a headquarters or a retail, but all types of places where people experience life. And And really, that's the business that we're in, is creating experiences and creating the theater of those experiences all around the world, different cultures, different people, different localities, different regulations, being very local, but also being very global as a community.
All right. So let me ask you to both sum up how you think those workforces have changed in the past 5 years. I mean, Judy, you spun off from your former parent company exactly 5 years ago this month. So it's kind of a natural break point, even if we didn't have the pandemic, to think about having disrupted so many of our workforce and workplace patterns. But what do you think's actually changed? What are the most meaningful shifts you see?
Yeah, so we, as you can imagine, have a workforce that spans from an entry-level workforce. About a sixth of our workforce globally is Gen Z. And they have a very different focus than what I call our loyal experts, who are on the other end, who are boomers like myself. And it's that blend and that spectrum in between, whether it's a millennial, that are all motivated by different reasons. Whether it's purpose, whether it's work-life flexibility, or whether it's independent work. And the challenge I think we have, not just as leaders, but as a society, is trying to create an environment, logically and physically, where everyone can succeed and where you can optimize the workforce to be able to serve customers. So here's what's in common. It's human, it's customer-centric, and in our case is based on our foundations, which we call our absolutes, which are safety, ethics, and quality. And that's where we start. Then we add technology, then we add working together in collaboration and autonomy at different times, but that's really the basic.
Right. Diane, do you see a big shift?
Sure. I think what Judy said is so important, that culture and those values, really have been a continuum. But I would add to it what has changed. So you try to, think what is different. And I would say the level of candor among people, the kind of, I'd call it the honesty of the conversation about what works and what doesn't work. And I think that's been very healthy. Of course, we all hear the debates of, I don't want to be in the office or I want to be in the office. But in many ways, it's created a new level of alignment around, we all want to do great work. We all have these same values. But how are we going to get there, knowing what we know today about the benefits of some things that maybe we hadn't done before? And we want to take those forward and maybe challenge some of the things from the past that really didn't provide the value that we all kind of pretended it did. So I think it really opened the door to something much better.
I mean, candor may be something that not every CEO or co-chair would appreciate from their whippersnapper employees, but how do you actually channel that? How do you make sure you're getting the best feedback, the best ideas from your workforce without it being complete chaos?
Yeah, just to follow on, I'm sure we both have thoughts on that, because I think everyone here kind of experienced that I've got to listen to this moment. You can kind of only for so long say, well, that's just going to pass. And so really taking serious what you're hearing, but also, and this is that wisdom part that hopefully as leaders we can bring to that, is kind of, being able to pull out what might be about something else. Is it really about how you like to work, or is it really about the fact you have a longer commute than you realized, but you've always had that long commute? Is it about childcare? Is it about things that really are core to doing excellent work? I don't have the resources. I don't have the interface with people I need to see. Those are material in achieving excellence in the organization. And so really starting to be able to categorize what goes where, not that they're not all important and you've got to figure out how to deal with all of them, but really as a leader starting to see what lands where and how you deal with it.
Yeah, no, I think what we've learned, especially over the past 5 years, is that people learn differently too. And as we continue to grow, and we've grown our organization fairly significantly with the growth in our business, especially our service business, is we needed to come up with a new way to embrace skill development, skill enhancement. if you go back in time, our business was a little more mechanical. And it went to electromechanical, and now it is absolutely digital and connected. So how do we, and we're doing a pilot right now with a few thousand of our new onboarded mechanics in Europe to say, how do we effectively onboard you? How do we give you the real-time training you need, whether you're just joining the industry for the first time and you're an apprentice, whether you're coming from another part of industry, or you happen to be more experienced, but the digitally native activity you need is different. So again, how do you do all that today in a physical environment and in a virtual environment? Because digital is going to pull us all through, but there's still that human element that you need.
Have you fundamentally changed the way training works?
Absolutely, absolutely. And you can envision when we think about maintenance in the future, and you should all, I hope you all feel safe using our equipment. We like to think of it as the first autonomous vehicle around.
That's right.
But safety obviously comes first, and there's a lot of regulations for why we can't do remote maintenance. But can we do remote assistance through smart goggles and smart visuals in the future, where we can bring additional credibility and additional intelligence to bear? Gen AI is going to play a tremendous role in all of this.
Can I ask, would you like to pick up on that?
I wanted to just, add another piece to this kind of learning and training part that really is some shared experiences that both of our companies are having kind of in real time, which is, again, and we can talk about AI and all that, but both of us are involved in some very, very visionary projects on the other side of the world that are demanding of our organizations a level of innovation that we've never even, produced before. Elevators that are going sideways, right? That are going diagonally, that are going to move through a new city of 9 million people, and things that we probably can't even talk about out there. But that's the other part of what's happening differently perhaps in the last 5 or 6 years, is we have clients who have ambition that we've never seen before, and rising to that occasion as organizations to be able to deliver.
So I know you've got a fascinating report out this week on today's workforce, and it says today's workforce desires an experience that is intentional, aligned, and purpose-driven. What does that mean in practice?
Yeah, so Gensler is the largest architecture firm in the world and also the largest workplace design firm in the world. So we started in 1965, and for the last 60 years have been designing the workplaces and headquarters of most of the companies in this room and people listening, the top tech companies, the largest financial services firms, all the top law firms, and so on. And then about 20 years ago, we literally started our research institute to do more than just design workplaces, but to really understand how workplace is changing, and to answer that question for our clients of what makes folks productive? How do I, really enhance and grow productivity and effectiveness through the choices I make in terms of workplace design, and trying to connect those dots, and that's something we've been focusing on. So to answer your question, just giving a little background, we do surveys of workers across the world twice a year, and we've been following the data even during COVID and all of the dialogue that has occurred. And so our most recent workplace survey was really interesting, and I think everyone kind of knows that, wow, workplaces that are being designed today look really different. They're much more feeling of residential. You're not seeing that corporate kind of a look and feel. You're seeing more collaborative areas, coffee bars, and different kinds of meeting areas, phone booths and these sorts of things. And that's becoming the new language of our workplaces. But what we found, and I think the points that are being made, and I hope you all kind of go to our website and see the report that came out yesterday from our latest research, but that people want all those things, but they really want to make sure it's tied to how their organization works.
Right.
Don't just look in the latest magazine, CEO. Don't just look in the latest magazine and say, I want one of those. ask people, really understand the amount of small meetings, larger meetings, the level of technology, the amount of virtual versus in person that's needed. And that's that purposeful part. No one wants to see, you know, the spaces that are great, but no one uses. And then the things they need, they can't find. And that's still going on in the workplace today.
Okay. So Judy, we've been through the Great Resignation, quiet quitting. It seems though it's a slightly different economic backdrop right now. When you look at the markets you're across, what's the supply and demand equation like for talent?
Yeah, well, talent is certainly, depending where you are in the world, 80% of our 72,000 colleagues are not located in the United States. So we truly see talent, and it's reflected different in local markets. But the talent is there. There's challenges in aging populations. If you would go to Japan, some other locations, where you really do have to start much younger to get people interested because it's a smaller talent pool. But in most of the world, whether it's South Europe, whether it's Middle East, Asia itself, the talent is there. They're hardworking, and we think we offer them a very bright future and a career. And I think, again, beyond the physical, which is important to all of us, you know, it is all about having that sense of mission, that sense of purpose, and in most cases, especially today, making a difference for society.
All right. Final question. What do we call an elevator that goes sideways and doesn't elevate?
I would call it a non-starter, but...
On that note, Judy, Diane, thank you very much.
Please welcome Senator Michael Bennet of Colorado and Burgess Everett, Congressional Bureau Chief at Semaphore.
Afternoon, Senator.
Hello, Burgess. How are you?
Great. Thank you so much for joining us. Sorry we couldn't bring you out to GC, but I'm guessing you're enjoying your recess a little bit.
I'm very, very happy not to be there. So, although I'd be happy to be there with you.
You're not the first person to say that to me. So, let's start with your. I mean, you made some news very recently. You are running for governor of your state. Why would you leave behind pro forma sessions and cloture votes to stay home in Colorado?
No, I think that the Senate in many ways has become an employment agency. We're not really legislating anymore. We're simply approving or voting against nominees, but that's not the reason. The reason is that I think we have a very fundamental set of answers that we've got to get to as a country. We need not just to resist Donald Trump, not just to fight Donald Trump. We need a positive vision for what the future is going to look like for the American people, and especially for our kids and our grandkids. And I really do think Colorado can be a place where people feel like if they're working hard, they can get ahead, and that their kids are going to be able to get ahead. And that loss of economic security, I think, is one of the essential driving forces of Trump and Trumpism. And if we don't solve it, we really will lose the democracy.
Well, talk to me a little bit about that. You're in the spectrum of the Democratic Party, I would say you're a fairly pro-trade Democrat. So what are you hearing back home from these tariffs? What are folks telling you back home?
People are saying that it's a completely irrational, non-strategic approach to the problem. I'm meeting with some small businesses right after this call today, some of whom may be actually destroyed by what Donald Trump has done. I think there'd be general agreement that the form of state-sponsored capitalism that China has pursued over many, many decades turned out to make a lot of the promises about their entry into the WTO and the promises of global trade hollow to a lot of people. And I think there's a consensus that we should do that differently. Unleashing a trade war on 90% of the world all at the same time strikes people as a pretty bad idea here. And you can see President Trump trying to walk it back. In the meantime, though, the collateral damage is extraordinary. I am not sure. I've racked my brains. I can't think of an action that any president has taken in my lifetime that's been more anti-small business and anti-workers in small business than the so-called reciprocal tariffs that Donald Trump has imposed.
Well, I hear you talking about that, and I hear some of your colleagues, especially from, say, places in the Midwest where manufacturing's been decimated, they say, well, tariffs are good in some ways, we just don't like the way he's imposing these. Is that an effective message for the Democratic Party? Do you think you need to go more strongly at these tariffs and not sort of equivocate on them?
You mean at them in terms of opposing them? Is
Correct.
That what you're saying?
Correct.
No, I think that, look, the American economy for the last 40 or 50 years has not delivered for working people. And we have some of the lowest economic mobility of any country in the industrialized world. I mean, there are a million statistics, but let me just give you two. If you are 30 years old in America today, you're the first generation of Americans where half of you is going to earn less income than your parents. If you're a young man in America today in your 20s, you are earning 40% less in your income than you were in 1976. These are fundamental seismic issues. And my judgment is that it's very hard to hold on to a democracy unless you have economic opportunity, unless people feel like if they work hard, they're going to get ahead. And part of that has been bipartisan failure to create a competitive bulwark for the United States when it comes to trade. I do believe that trade in our hemisphere is really important, and trade with allies over the world is really important. I think we can engage them, though, in pushing back against the state-sponsored capitalism that China represents, that has not just been menacing to the free world, it actually has undermined our ability to function as democracies in really fundamental ways.
Let's say you become governor in 2027 and these tariffs, or some of them, are still in place. What would you do as an executive to help your state weather that? Are there ways that governors can counteract the effects of these tariffs?
If they're still in effect by then, I would imagine that there would be a bipartisan chorus of Republican and Democratic governors joining together and saying, you got to relent because you're destroying small businesses all over our state. And I think that there is a massive amount of potential for bipartisan consensus around a much more strategic and measured approach that engages our allies, that doesn't punish, our biggest trading partners like Canada and Mexico on the way to trying to get China to comply better with the international order.
What about the Senate? Do you have any faith that these tariffs will become too much for your Republican colleagues to bear and folks will threaten to overturn them legislatively?
I would say faith is a strong word when you're talking about a place where Pete Hegseth got all the votes that he got to become Secretary of Defense. But I do think that they must be hearing, I know they're hearing from small businesses in their states, just like I am. And we already actually have introduced a bill led by Chuck Grassley and Maria Cantwell that would say that, after 100 days, if the president has failed to get congressional approval, the tariffs lapse. I joined that bill. I think I was the second Democrat, maybe, to be on it. Joined it with Mitch McConnell, who's been an ally on Ukraine. So you're beginning to see glimmers, I think, of bipartisan pushback that's important.
I've known you long enough to be surprised that you would agree with Mitch McConnell on anything at all, I would say.
Well, thank you. I know. Well, you've heard me over many, many years worry about the hammer that he's taken to the institution of the Senate and other things as well. But he has been an important voice on Ukraine, and he's being an important voice on international trade. And by the way, for the same reason, because he sees our national security bound up in these bound up in these issues. So I appreciate your holding up my street cred as having railed on him over and over and over again.
Yeah, you'll need that in a Democratic primary in your state, I think.
Absolutely. Yeah.
I have my own assumptions about the answer to this question, but is being a Democratic senator in the minority, is that fun right now?
Look, it's always a privilege to serve. It always has been, and that's true. I mean, it's an amazing privilege to serve in the Senate. What's not fun is, living under the tyranny of Donald Trump for anybody, no matter where they are. I've had, I think, 7 town hall meetings, and people are enraged at what he's doing. By the way, these aren't Democratic town hall meetings. Anybody can come to these meetings. People are enraged at what Donald Trump is doing, and they are often enraged because they say that, they feel like people in Congress should be doing more to fight. And I've been saying to them, thank you very much for calling and letting me know you appreciate it. When I was banging on Bobby Kennedy when he was claiming that, well, I can't even get into it, but banging on Bobby Kennedy or banging on, our Secretary of Defense for his use of signal to transmit classified information, but also people saying do more, do more, do more. I think that's part of it. The other part of it, from my perspective, is the Democratic Party has been repudiated. We've lost to Trump twice. We didn't just lose to him once. And the second time we lost to him, we lost after he had taken away a woman's right to choose. The first president to strip us of a fundamental civil right since Reconstruction. I mean, that, in my mind, that begs real questions about what it is we're presenting to the American people. And so I don't think anybody in the Senate and the Democratic caucus has any right to feel, angry because we're working there or angry because Trump is there. I'm angry. I blame him for many, many things, but I don't blame him for getting elected. I blame the opposition, of which I'm a part, for allowing him to get elected, which is a disaster for our country.
Well, Senator Schumer, who we talked to a couple days ago on this stage, he said that the Democratic Party is benefiting from some of Trump's chaos on the tariffs, on Signalgate, et cetera. Have you seen the brand improve at all in the last 3 months?
I don't think it's nearly enough. Not nearly enough. Look, I think we're going to take the House back in the midterms, partly because of the laws of political physics. And that's amazing and awesome. And we should be doing everything we can to do that because we need that firewall against the insanity of Trump. We have to have it. The nation has to have it. But it's for us to be able to gain back the Senate and to hold it in an enduring way, for us to be able to elect a president. I think we're going to have a more compelling vision for the American people about how we're going to create an economy again that in America, when it grows for everybody, not just the people at the very top. And that is after 40 years of failed trickle-down economics, that's where we find ourselves as, in both parties. And I don't think we're even close to framing that set of issues yet.
They're about to pull the curtains down on me, so I'll give you one last quick one that I'm sure you won't want to answer in depth anyway.
I think we're out of time. Sorry. No.
You probably will not have to vote in another Democratic leadership race, but do you think Senator Schumer is the right leader for the Senate Democrats right now?
I think that we should be assessing that, constantly, and we need to figure out where we've let people down. And I think that it is important for there to be a new generation of leaders in both houses of Congress and in the party generally. As you know, Burgess, I was the very first Democrat to go on national television after Joe Biden's horrific debate performance with Donald Trump and say we were going to lose in a landslide if he stayed on the ticket. Turned out we basically lost in a landslide anyway, and we're going to have to correct that, and it's going to require us to make some uncomfortable decisions, I think.
Okay, Senator Bennett, thank you so much for joining us. We appreciate your
Burgess,
candor.
thanks for having me. Save my spot. I'll see you soon.
Okay, see you soon, sir.
Bye. Thank you.
Please welcome Joseph Henricks, President and CEO of CSX, and Tim McDonald, Climate and Energy Editor at Semaphore.
It doesn't matter. Yeah. Great.
Get your advertisement there.
Okay. Joe, thank you so much for joining us. I'm really interested to have this conversation about the future of the rail network. One thing I learned when I was looking into some questions for you, which I didn't realize, was that historically coal was the main product transported by rail, right? Am I getting that?
No question. Matter of fact, for probably the first 180 years of the railroad's lives, it was predominantly driven by what happened with coal.
Yeah, so I mean, in the last few years, we've gone from coal being around half of the power mix in the U.S. to something like 15%. How has that affected your business?
Yeah, I mean, we're the largest railroad in the East, so we still have a lot of coal, obviously West Virginia, Kentucky, even down in Alabama and southern Illinois. And it's our second largest customer base now, chemicals being the largest because a lot of hazardous materials have to go over rail. So it's still, but most of it's export now compared to domestic use. There's still a large export demand for U.S. coal, especially metallurgical coal, for steel production, concrete production in places like India and Eastern Europe and other places.
Yeah. I mean, so as a rail company, a logistics company, obviously, very integral to trade networks. What's the impact on your company from these tariffs and the kind of trade situation we're facing?
I mean, everyone's still trying to figure it out, as you probably have heard all week long. I mean, from our standpoint, about half our volume is intermodal. So think about containers that come through the ports or that are moved around on 53-foot trailers, across the country on trucks. And the international intermodal business for the last couple months has spiked up. And that's probably because people are trying to pull things ahead and obviously get things in before the tariffs or during the 90-day window, whatever that may be. So it's going to be hard to tell what happens. What we're already seeing is a decrease in ocean freight liners planning to bring material in over the next, several months. So that should probably decline. The rest, one of our largest customer segments is autos. I mean, most of the finished automobiles are shipped via rail because it's just too hard to move them around the country on trucks. And, that business is being disrupted because of the North American impact of Mexico and Canada, but more production predominantly should happen in the U.S. So we're still in a TBD trying to figure all that out with the automotive companies. And then steel and aluminum and all the parts that go with that, we've seen an increase in the last 3 or 4 weeks of increased steel and aluminum production in the U.S. So the other parts of our business, grain, aggregate rock, coal, aren't impacted really by the tariffs. So
is this onshoring of auto manufacturing? Is that
onshoring
actually
definitely impacts us.
Is that bad for you? Yeah.
It's good for us.
Oh, it's good for you
because, especially as an Eastern railroad, because basically the way we're set up, basically we interchange at the Mississippi River or Chicago with all the Western railroads. So most of the production's in the Southeast and Midwest, and so it helps us that there's more production coming. As a matter of fact, we currently have 600 projects on our network right now under development with customers looking for land and locations to locally produce. Some of that's relocating things already in the U.S. and some of that's bringing things back. That's an increase of 100 versus where we were 3 months ago. So we had 500. So it's increasing. The activity's increasing, which is encouraging. It takes years for it to materialize. But at the same time, it's very encouraging. So that would be good for us over time. But as you know, it can't happen overnight. It has to happen over an extended period of time. Hyundai just opened a new plant in Savannah, outside Savannah. It was announced in 2019, just opened. So 6 years.
Yeah.
It's on our network, so we're happy about that.
Yeah.
But that's the kind of things we're talking about.
Yeah. I get the sense that the U.S. rail network in general is a relatively underutilized resource, that there's probably more we could be doing there. I mean, what does the sort of rail network of the future look like in the U.S.? How can we use this existing infrastructure more and more efficiently? What does that look like in the future?
Yeah, in many ways, the rail network in North America is underappreciated because it's been here so long. Mm-hmm. In most towns, we were there first, and the towns built up around the railroads. And so in most places, we're the envy of the world to have this freight rail network. So it's like as Americans, we're jealous of Europeans' passenger rail system or China or Japan's, monorail, bullet train type systems. But we have an advantage because of the freight rail system, which was developed to basically go west and to create the development of the United States. So, our railroad started in 1827, the B&O Railroad, which is on your monopoly boards. And so we've been around a long time. So what I mean by that is the capacity's been here a long time. It's been consolidated over time, but it exists. And about 40% of rail traffic that goes over, all traffic that goes over 500 miles goes on rail. But if that number would increase, it'd be greatly beneficial to the U.S. economy. Why? One, it's 4 to 5 times better for the environment than trucks. Taxpayers pay for the roads. We pay for our own infrastructure. It's a lot safer, and frankly, it takes congestion off the road. So you're right, in general, but it starts with the railroads. We have to be interested in growing and wanting to take on more volume because we have very favorable margins, and we have an attractive business model today. So we have to have a desire to grow in a way that is helpful for the economy, but also for our shareholders and for the companies.
And that you think that hasn't been the case?
No, I think it's growing. I think the opportunity is there. I think there was the Staggers Act happened in 1980, which allowed the consolidation of railroads to get to a point where they could actually make money. Because for 150 years they lost money and bankrupt and over again. Now there's an opportunity because the businesses are healthy to be able to invest and grow, and that's taken 40 years to kind of materialize.
Where does the workforce of the future for rail kind of fit into that? I mean, people probably remember a couple years ago we came close to a strike. I mean, first of all, how did things with the labor force get to that kind of bad relations point, and how does that move forward from here?
First of all, over the last 10 years or so, there was massive restructuring in the rail industry. I mean, when I dealt with, I retired as president of Ford Motor Company 5 years ago, so I dealt with from the auto industry side to look at rail for decades. And we viewed the rail companies in the 10, 20, 30 years ago as quasi-government agencies that employed a lot of people and gave very poor service and had low margins. But all that's changed. So there was massive restructuring in the last 10, 15 years, which made the railroads a lot more efficient, but also reduced a lot of jobs and also made them more private sector businesses as opposed to public-private kind of these, whatever you want to call them. That reduced a lot of workforce, caused a lot of friction with customers, with employees, with unions. And now we're coming out of that. And we're investing heavily in our relationship with unions. But to your point, in 22, Congress had to vote to not allow a strike because within a couple of days that the railroad is shut down, the economy is shutting down. So all the things that we take for granted that we use today, the railroads move. And so we have to build a different relationship going forward because the workforce of the future has to be one, they have to be a place people want to work. And we're an outdoor sport. We're skilled trades. All of those things have been, frankly, hard to fill jobs, whether you're auto mechanics in dealerships or engineers and conductors on a train. They've been hard to fill. They're very good paying jobs, 6 figures plus, and we're still one of the few enterprises that has pensions for our employees. They actually is a government-funded, U.S. government-funded pension, actually, the way we fund it. So the government kind of oversees it. So it's a really well-protected pension. It's a very unique situation because, again, our history and who we are. So the workforce of the future has to be a highly skilled, motivated workforce, but you got to make it an environment people want to be in. And again, we're 7 days a week. We work every holiday. We work 24 hours a day. So it's tough work. It's outdoor sport, all weather conditions. So it's not for everybody, but it can be a great job for sure.
Do you see that workforce growing in the future, or if we have more automation in some of the way your system works, I mean, maybe it would be a smaller workforce? Or how do you
I think
that?
over time, there will be efficiencies that happen. I mean, technology. I like to say technology is undefeated over time, so you really can't fight it over time. In the short term, you can try, but and so artificial intelligence is going to help us be a lot more efficient because we're a connected network. Think about it. We have 23,000 miles and 20,000 miles and 23,000 employees all connected that you can't get off the rail. You got to stay on the rail. Ideally, we always stay on the rail. Bad things happen when we don't have to stay on the rail. And so we can't humanly simulate all the possible scenarios in our minds to make decisions on a minute-by-minute basis on how to prioritize things. So AI is really going to help with that, but also all the data that comes with that. So, and also technology. I mean, we still use knuckles that were developed 100 and some years ago that connect the cars. So over time, you're going to see a lot more technology that will come into the rail network, which will lead to some efficiency, but it also continues to need more and more skill in the workforce that we do have, and also can make these very rewarding jobs because it's not an assembly line. You're really thinking and working at the same time when you're on a railroad.
Just very, very quickly, I mean, in terms of technology, rail cars used to be powered by coal. What do you see in the future? We have hydrogen fuel cells, batteries. How are trains running?
So today, obviously, they're all diesel, which is very efficient, and we can take a ton of goods 500 miles on 1 gallon of diesel fuel. because we're low friction and not stopping and those kind of things. But the future we think is probably hydrogen, but it's out there a while because of the horsepower we need and the torque we need. And also we have self-contained fueling stations in our yards, so we don't have to worry about the public nature of hydrogen fueling, which has risk to it. We're also testing and we're using hybrid electric diesel trains in our yards in Baltimore, for example, and we're also using biodiesel a lot in Florida. Very successful. We can't get enough of it, but biodiesel has had a lot of success too. So but hydrogen probably is a long-term solution unless we can find. You can't do batteries because you can't get stuck somewhere in the middle of a railroad and try and charge it. You got to be able to have power supply that can be on the locomotive itself.
Yeah, great. Well, Joe,
with fuel cells and of course with hydrogen.
Right.
For sure.
Okay. Well, Joe, we'll be watching that very closely. Thank you so much for this.
Thank you all.
Appreciate your time. Okay.
Thank you.
All right. Cheers.
Please welcome Steve Ballmer, founder of USA Facts and former CEO of Microsoft, and Gina Chan, senior editor at Semaphore.
Hi, Steve.
Hey, Gina. How we doing today?
Good. Thank you so much for joining us, and thanks to all of you for sticking with us on a Friday afternoon. Steve, as they said in introducing you, most people know you as the former CEO of Microsoft, along with now the owner and chairman of the LA Clippers. But we're actually, by the way, good luck this weekend on the game. But we're actually not here to talk about sports or technology, at least maybe not in the way that people think. We're here to talk about education and how important that is for our future, for America's future. And people may be surprised to learn that you wrote a letter to the Education Secretary, Linda McMahon, earlier this month, talking about some of the cuts that they're looking at the department, including cuts that would eliminate data that you, as founder of USA Facts back in 2017 that you founded, that tries to explain the US government by the numbers, including numbers provided by the Education Department, may be going away. And I wanted to help explain to our audience here and those watching online why you chose to make that move. You said the future of US education is on the line. Why do you think that?
Well, let me give a couple contexts. Number one, USA Facts is a project I started when I retired from Microsoft. I had an interest in understanding where the government, not just federal, but also state and local governments, where do they raise their money, how much comes in taxes, from who, what does it get spent on? But of course, government's not a business. The issue then is, and also what kind of outcomes does government get for its money? In fact, we even, for the business people in the audience, we wrote a 10K for government in the United States. As we looked at outcomes and input specifically in the area of education, it's not hard to see that there are those who might believe that, for example, we have 33% roughly proficiency in math for kids in the 8th grade level. There are some people who probably say that's not good enough. At USA Facts, we don't try to be judgmental, but I think most people probably would say, whoa, we got an issue here. Our federal government spent about $268 billion on the Department of Education last year. We know that from the work we do. 56 billion of it was one-time money, theoretically one-time money left from the COVID funds. And if you look at the rest, it's 3+% of the total federal budget. And 60% almost of that is going directly into loans and scholarships for young people to go to college. And another almost 40% is spent on supplemental money that goes into public schools, affects about half the kids in the country, amounts to another $650 a kid. And those federal funds can be as high in some districts as 80%, in a few districts in New Mexico, or as low as 21% throughout the state of New Hampshire. So we're spending all this money, even though it's only, 3% roughly of the total federal budget. But as we look at, is that money working for us in the right way? How do we measure outcomes as opposed to just the inputs in what we spend? There's a few core databases that we use to publish so people can make their own assessments of the quality of education in the country. And I wanted the secretary to know that whatever cuts, whatever reorganization, whatever ever happens with the Department of Education, we need to know, all of us as citizens need to know, is that federal government money working? And the government also pulls together a bunch of data from the states. That data for me, if I ran a state Department of Education, would be fundamental in comparing. It's kind of like competitive comparison in any business. The federal government needs to pull that data together, in my opinion, to run appropriately. And the federal government runs tests that are standard in proficiency across the country so that there's a way to compare really in all these states. And I thought the secretary needed to know that this small overhead piece, 2% of the total budget, 2% of 4% of the federal spend is going into overhead in the Department of Education. And the education statistics, National Center for Education Statistics, is a small part of that. And particularly in this world where we're talking about efficiency, if we're talking to business people who may be in the audience, efficiency has to come with outcomes. In the world of business, profit. In the world of government, successful outcomes for, in this case, kids.
Well, so tell us though why you decided to go public about it as well, because we have a lot of Fortune 500 CEOs here. We're all talking about the uncertainties in the economy, but there's obviously some caution as well about speaking out and wanting to have your voice heard in this kind of environment. You decided to go public with it. Why did you make that decision?
Yeah, we're not complaining about anything. We are cautioning that in the move, part of efficiency is effectiveness. And all we're doing is cautioning as we read, as we hear stories. We thought that not only was input that would be helpful for the secretary to hear, but our mission is to educate the American public, that's how we think about it, about their government through numbers. And we thought it important to have citizens understand the kinds of numbers that are used today to help evaluate, to help understand the quality of education in our country. So it's part of our education effort as much as anything. And also we think an important thing for the secretary to keep in mind.
So talk about this in the context of sort of setting the foundation for our kids to prepare them for the future, for the workforce, for global competition, especially given your background as the former CEO of Microsoft. What are you seeing in trends in the workforce, obviously with AI and developments there, of what kids need and what kind of deficiencies you're seeing, like in the state of Washington, where Microsoft, Amazon, many of the big tech companies are based. From the data you're seeing, are they getting the education they need for the future?
There's two aspects to that. One is, our kids in the basics of understanding numbers and words, if you will, are they coming out, well trained? What we've seen in the state of Washington, for example, is increases in graduation rates with no improvements in math or reading scores. Now, there's something that doesn't quite compute about that. Maybe graduation standards are down. I don't know. We don't try to, explain causation. Economists, sociologists can do that work. But there seems to be something that people could get alarmed about in that. Secondly, and now I'm kind of off my USA Facts view, and I'll just speak personally, I have a lot of concern that teachers will underutilize AI in the classroom for younger people. There's a lot of concern, will people really learn to write, to do math? I also have a concern, will kids really be ready to enter the workforce? And will the skills of today exactly match the skills of tomorrow? I don't think so. I think it's going to be an interesting, not necessarily an easy transition for society, but I'm a believer in technology. There have been plenty of technologies. People said, oh my God, we're going to go way backward. This is going to hurt, society and people's lives. I think there's going to be a tough transition, but I think over time, this creates more opportunity, more affluence, and more opportunity for people to live better lives.
Well, so going back to the National Center for Education Statistics and why you wrote this letter to Secretary McMahon, how are you thinking about AI in terms of data? Because, that is what, makes AI so effective. That's what is so informative about it. And it seems to me that if you had the right data and continue to have the right data, you could really then use that to pinpoint, which kids, as you say, are maybe graduating but shouldn't be, and being much more personalized in your education. What do you see the potential there?
Well, there's huge opportunity, from the, let's call it the micro level. How do you provide kids exactly what they need to continue to progress in their education? Even the short-term deliverables, let alone the long-term possibilities using AI, are immense. And I could almost say to any parent, why don't you write a few prompts? You can find them online and have sort of input your kids' school homework, and then their answers, and then what are the additional practice problems or explanation that the kids need. I mean, that's not entirely simple to do right now, but that's the juncture where we are. And then you can go up to the more macro. What does the teacher need to know? And how does it help the teacher improve his or her job? What does it mean for policymakers? But if you start right there with the individual child, I think that's where the greatest leverage point comes. I tried this myself the other day. I'm back trying to learn French. Guess what? I got a great French curriculum out of Microsoft Copilot.
Oh, wow. So what level are you at now? Are you getting ready to go to Paris tomorrow?
I am doing what I would call remedial work from somebody who used to actually know a reasonable amount of French.
Yeah. Well, going back to the workforce of the future, I mean, even right now with the advent and the advances in generative AI, we're seeing a huge war for talent, for PhDs, for people who have certain skills to really take this forward. How do you see that in the context of our education system now? I mean, we're in a talent war with China, with India, with globally and regionally. Are our kids prepared for that kind of future as well?
I think you got three buckets of young people. Bucket number one is, do we have those PhDs, those super scientists, those super engineers who can bring us the modern advances in technology? Now, to get there, we need to continue to have those top-level computer science departments across the country at the university level. I'd say we need to get the best and brightest globally, because if we're really in a talent war, it's not just about the talent that we develop here. So I think there's a big immigration issue on that dimension. Second level of talent is what I would say you will need as people's jobs evolve, whether it's programming, where the work programmers used to do yesterday is changing. The use of AI, we're doing this even as we prepare USA Facts. We use AI to help us create that product faster, more efficiently, and better than we ever have before. And then there's just the everyday uses that every student would need to function in the world. You're just faster at getting things done. You don't want to be that person in the workforce who feels behind.
All right, well, we're almost out of time, Steve, but before I leave you, I have to ask you, how are you feeling about this weekend?
Well, we're up 2-1. We played a heck of a game last night, and we're playing a very great team with one of the best players in the world. But I have some confidence, I've got some excitement, and go Clips!
Well, Steve, next time we see you, I hope you're here in person to do those flips here for the audience. So thank you for joining us.
Thanks all.
Please welcome Chris Wright, Secretary of the U.S. Department of Energy, and Alana Shore, Senior Washington Editor at Semaphore.
Thank you so much for being here with us today, Secretary Wright.
Thrilled to be
Pleasure
here.
have
Thanks
you.
for having me.
Now, you lead a key priority for the Trump administration, U.S. energy production and energy independence. I want to start with nuclear, though. You made some comments a few minutes ago that I thought were totally fascinating about restarting American enrichment in a meaningful way. Can you talk more about what you are planning to make that happen and how that might work?
Enrichment or nuclear overall?
Both. Let's start with enrichment, though.
Yeah, well, enrichment, at the end of the Cold War, think of that, in 1989, 1990, there was a huge dismantling of a lot of nuclear weapons around the world. From Russia, Kazakhstan, United States, huge reduction of arsenals. The US took a bunch of this material, the Russians have a bunch of this material, so downblending of highly enriched uranium for the last 20 years has really flooded the uranium markets of the world. Unfortunately, what had happened was that US enrichment capacity got squeezed out of the marketplace, really by prices. And we haven't launched the construction of a meaningful amount of nuclear capacity for decades. So we've sort of, most of our enriched uranium material for commercial reactors comes from overseas. Now we've got a bunch of small modular reactor companies, some really exciting new technologies. We've got, with an outlook for significant growth in demand for new electricity in the United States, there's interest in building large reactors again, despite the cost overruns at Vogtle. The last ones were built at less cost than the first unit at Vogtle. So I think we would like to see a renaissance of nuclear. Now, I know the renaissance of nuclear has been talked about for a long time. I think the conditions are there, and the administration is going to do everything we can to lean in to help commercial businesses and customers launch nuclear. We are offering up land at Department of Energy facilities for people that want to build things. We're making it easier to test reactors at a demonstration site at the Idaho National Labs. We recently announced supplying HALEU fuel, which is, instead of enriched in that 3 to 5% in a typical light water reactor, it's 20% enriched uranium for next generation reactors. We announced delivering that fuel to 5 of these next generation reactor companies. We are also using the Loan Program Office in situations where, for example, hyperscalers so want to see new electric and nuclear generation capacity, they'll put up large chunks of equity money to help, because utilities don't have the balance sheets or the risk tolerance to build nuclear power plants. But if you can have offtake customers that are well capitalized, put up a large amount of equity together with the developers to secure a execution of these projects, LPO office will come in with debt that makes the capital stack work so we can get plants built. Once they get built, contract financing will take out the LPO debt and we can recycle that into other projects. I'd like to not get in the position we're in, for example, with wind power, where the tax subsidies came in 32 years ago and they're still here today. You put subsidies into tax credits, they tend to be very sticky. So what we're doing at the Department of Energy is specific deals that are going to hopefully launch the first 5, 7, 8, 10, 20 reactors, and let's get this industry going again, then we'll get supply chain efficiencies and volume, costs will come down, and I think it should fly very well as a commercial industry.
To your point, though, the Renaissance has been talked about in the past and never quite panned out. Is there something you need from Congress, say in a tax bill? Are you looking for credits to speed this up? Any action?
Yes, and yes. and I should have mentioned, sorry, in your question, so there was some money appropriated a couple years ago that was specifically aimed at standing up enrichment in the United States again. That money has not been deployed yet. So we are looking at the right way to structure that, and have a bid and have one or two or more players say, here's our commercial plan, we're going to build capacity in the United States. We do have grant money to help support that from Congress already. And definitely in the reconciliation bill, we are talking as well about this is an area that I think some catalyzing investment makes sense. And I'm talking now about fission, what we have, but I should also say fusion power. I went to college 40 years ago, fired up to work on fusion energy. It's what powers the stars. And humans are ingenious. Of course, we'll figure it out. Now, good thing I didn't stay in that field because we don't have a business of it yet. But I'll tell you, the progress in the state of affairs today is incredibly exciting. At Lawrence Livermore National Labs at the Department of Energy only a little over 2 years ago, for the first time, we got more energy out of a fusion reaction than put in to light the fuel on fire. Just recently, I don't think we've announced it yet, a much higher multiple of energy out versus energy in. And we've got a number of commercial fusion companies. Definitely in the next several years, we're going to see at scale much more energy come out than goes in fusion devices. It's a little bit of time after that to make it commercial and machines and all that, but it's coming. It's not a maybe someday, always 20 years away thing. Watch the news. Fusion energy in the next 4 years is going to be very exciting. And so we're looking to how can we help catalyze that as well.
Fascinating. Rapidly, let's pivot to LNG, though. There is I believe, a $44 billion estimated LNG export project out of Alaska, and allies of the administration are hopeful that Asian allies will commit to buy some of that gas and help this project get off the ground. Can you update us on progress there? Japan, Thailand, Korea, these are all nations that are talking with the president right now on trade.
Yes. And look, that's a great question, and that is an exciting project, and I think its odds of happening are pretty good. It's looking exciting. With every big project, there's challenges, there's offtake challenges, there's financing challenges, but I think the interest in offtake agreements is high. You get secure and sizable offtake agreements, buyers of LNG. I think the financing and the project comes together. Quick comment on that. Before I got my new job, a lifelong energy nerd, everyone might not know this. What's the fastest growing energy source in the planet? If you look over the last 12 years since the financial crisis, or you look over the last 50 years, natural gas by far. Since 2010 to 2023, right, the world went from 500 exajoules a year of energy consumption to 600 exajoules of energy consumption. 40% of that new energy came from natural gas. That is a major energy source in the world and the fastest growing energy source in the world. And the United States, it's our second largest export and our fastest growing export. In the next, 5 or 7 years, it'll become the single largest export from the United States. The single largest export from the United States today, oil.
So back to the tariff talks and how they relate to these potential offtake agreements. Are the tariffs making it easier, better, no effect? How is all that playing out right now in terms of getting this project off the ground?
So we're in the middle of sausage making right now. The president tariffs, and it's disturbing to people, it's uncertain because we're in the middle of it. But let me just hit the 2 points about what's the president's plan here? What's the agenda? It's driven by two things. Since the end of World War II, the United States has been incredibly welcoming to import products from all the nations of the world. I celebrate that. The goal of the president is to get all of the nations of the world equally welcoming to American exports as we've been to their exports. That's a grow trade agenda. The other piece of the president's agenda is to try to find the right incentives to reshore manufacturing in the United States. Over the last 25 years, a lot of energy-intensive manufacturing has left the United States. Well, we could buy it cheaper from Asia, people said, so no big deal. But those jobs, in large-scale industrial jobs and energy-intensive manufacturing, they tend to be blue-collar. They're often concentrated in rural areas. This is just the demographic that's had a rough ride the last 30 years. If you lived in an urban area and you're highly educated, boy, it's been a great few decades. I've been very lucky in my life. But if you grew up in a rural area or a less thriving community and didn't get the same educational opportunity as the rest of us, your economic opportunities have actually gotten worse. The President is deeply committed to make the economic opportunities better for those people, and so he wants an agenda that makes it compelling to invest in the United States and put those jobs here. And the last thing, as an energy nerd, can I repeat my point?
Of course.
So manufacturing, when we think about energy, people either talk about the electricity grid or they talk about automobiles. And of course, those are important and real uses of energy, and I love the electricity grid. But the energy delivered on the electricity grid to end users represents 20% of total global energy. People think it's like the same thing. It's a piece, it's a sliver. We use about a quarter of energy for transportation. But the biggest use of energy by far is manufacturing, making things. And you can't make an automobile or a building or an internet or an airplane without materials. We spend 20% of all global energy just to make cement, steel, plastics, and fertilizer, the 4 pillars of the modern world. 20% of energy just to make those 4. We use over 40% of global energy just to make things. Aluminum and other metals and polysilicon and all these materials. This is the base of which everything else is made of. So it's over 40% globally. In the United States, we consume 25 exajoules of energy for manufacturing out of 100 exajoules total. So only 25% of our energy is used for manufacturing, and that's because so much of it's been outsourced. China consumes 70 exajoules for manufacturing. So you can see where most of the industry that's left Europe and the United States has gone to China and elsewhere in Asia. So the President's agenda is, let's bring some of that manufacturing back to the United States. Let's bring those jobs. Let's bring that economic security. We have the most advantageous energy system on the planet here. We should use it for manufacturing as well as everything else.
Well, we are at time here, but I want to sneak in one really quick yes or no question. I'm a political reporter at heart. We had Governor Burgum here, who is now a member of the cabinet. Would you ever consider running for office yourself after your term in the cabinet is up?
No.
There, you heard it. It's news. Thank you so much, Secretary. Pleasure.
Thank you. Thank you.
Please welcome back Bennett Richardson, General Manager and Global Head of Public Affairs at Semaphore.
All right. Thank you, Secretary Wright. Thank you all so much for being with us today. That concludes our last session of the World Economy Summit. So please join me in thanking the entire Semaphore newsroom, our events team, just an amazing group of people who pulled off this massive undertaking. As you all know, Semaphore is just 2.5 years old, so it's a pretty phenomenal convening. Thank you all so much for being here. For this conversation specifically, I just wanted to put something on your calendar. June 12th, just down the block at Gallup's Great Hall, we're going to be continuing this conversation with our World of Work Summit. So we're going to be diving into a whole bunch more out of the Global Workplace Survey. We'll have a bunch of CHROs joining us. It'll be a fascinating workforce conversation. So I hope you can join us on June 12th back here in Washington. But thank you all so much for joining us this week. We hope you have a great weekend. Thank you. Cheers.